Hey everyone, I'm Jack, and welcome back to our Star Wars ranking series. Today I'll be counting down the comparatively many, but few bosses of Star Wars Jedi Knight, Jedi Academy from worst to best. Unlike Jedi Outcast, of which I made the one video ranking both the levels and bosses together, as the bosses were neither mechanically expansive enough nor were there numerically enough to warrant two separate ranking videos, please watch the Outcast ranking, it'd be greatly appreciated. I'd argue there were enough bosses within Academy to justify a ranking, and each boss had a semi-unique feel to them that further incentivized me to make a boss ranking. Jedi Knight Jedi Academy, of course, is arguably the most influential and fan-loved Star Wars game of all time, rivaling Knights of the Old Republic as the conclusion to the first non-film-based Star Wars game series, even if it wasn't planned to be so. Academy plays like a magnum opus of combat design, a culmination of all the previous combat advancements LucasArts and Raven Software had crafted from Dark Forces 1 to 2 to Jedi Outcast that makes for simply the best gameplay in the Star Wars video game roster, ever. While the overall design focus of Jedi Academy transitioned from the likes of storytelling, exploration, and map structure of its predecessors to linear level design and combat, this relative difference in overall structure gives Academy a much more modern feel, a generally positive thing to have going for you, I'd argue. I'll save talks on game structure, lore, map design, and whatnot for the level ranking, although within said levels there were a great many bosses for an older Star Wars game, and, unlike Outcast, I decided on actually playing through Aspyr Media's remaster, which surprisingly doesn't run like something you'd see on Angry Video Game Nerd. The bosses weren't on the levels of, say, a From Software title, apples to oranges, but for a game made in 2003 are quite mechanically advanced and are all around high quality as well. Also, join our Discord. Anyways, let's get into the ranking. To go from Shadow Troopers to these tin cans as your worst boss is a tune-up like what Wayne Rooney's scalp went through that one year United should have probably won the league, but the scriptwriters at the FA said otherwise. What I mean to say is a massive leap in low-tier gameplay as such is an indicator to Jedi Academy's more polished combat overall compared to Jedi Outcast. Jedi training droids are less bosses and more enemies serving as antagonist origin plot devices, hence their bottom spot though, with their initial appearance coming from Rosh turning them on in the midst of your Jedi trial so he can get to Kyle before you, a not-so-secretive foreshadowing of his character's eventual moral destination. Jedi training droids are quite difficult for an initial lightsaber-wielding enemy to be honest, but sideways movement and rolling to create open angles for attacks should make quick work of these heaps of scrap. Like most Star Wars boss rankings, it's droids and random enemies that fill up the bottom slots of every video. Lannik Rakto is a minor antagonist that leads one of the many optional side missions set between each disciple of Ragnus Ark, a fairly powerful crime lord living in the upper echelons of Coruscant's dirty underworld. The reason you're there is to capture him and prevent his droids from reaching the disciples. Rakto Corleone was their main supplier of these illegal war machines, and he is all business, no pun intended. Why couldn't Jaden just leap across the bridge? Well, I don't know, but boy have I got an idea for you. There are 4 assassin droids set in a hidden compartment, which sounds tedious on paper, but they're actually cheesable. The droids work quite similar to Galak Fayar, but instead of the shields shutting off from damage, they're on a set timer, so... not. My bad. With that in mind, you can just stand completely still while their shields are operative and swoop in when they deactivate. Outside of this arena, there are a few other assassin droids in more spatially challenging combat arenas that prevent you from standing entirely still, but the aforementioned strategy is consistent as long as you take out the other mercenaries first. Lannik Rakto's assassin droids were a neat one-level mechanic. No more, no less. I was, admittedly, half expecting a Wampa cameo in the Hoth main mission. They showed up in the Force Unleashed Hoth DLC, and that had to come from somewhere was my thought process. Oh yeah, that one scene too. I don't know man, Empire Strikes Back is forgettable. There's nothing too mechanically complex about Wampas, which is fair. I wouldn't expect Bigfoot to do an ollie shuffle or something, but they feature unique attacks and animations and are deceptively quick. That leap remains one of the hardest things to react to in Jedi Academy. Without force speed, Jaden is actually slower than an oncoming Wampa. I recommend bringing the Demp 2 as it, does something, but there's not much strategy to Wampas aside from keeping distance, and in terms of surviving, I just happened to get lucky. Wampas were unique mini-bosses that were essential to the Hoth mission, separating itself from the others preceding it. Putting one in the room before Alora was pretty iffy though. It's easy to compare the Disciples of Ragnos to Reborn, a faction of Dark Jedi serving a greater cause that came to power through unnatural force amplification. Now that I say it aloud, they're narratively identical. On a gameplay level, I much prefer Reborn, however. While Disciples and New Reborn are a lot broader in style variety thanks to Academy's introduction of dual-wield sabers and saber staffs, Reborn win the variety category for me still with the different variants and such. It's just a lot more noticeable and at least they look pretty Gucci'd up. Disciples got no drip, bruh. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that the Disciples do have a similar caste system. Take how red-coated Disciples have Force Drain as their main source of power, blue have lightning, and so on. Disciples get overshadowed by New Reborn anyways, who I just added to this spot as there's no real difference. One's a Dark Jedi and the other's a Dark Jedi. You got Wikipedia to thank for even letting me know there was a distinction. Disciples and New Reborn are extremely difficult as they're questionably equal to Jaden Korr's power at any given point in the game, essentially neutering the marketed power fantasy found in Jedi Academy, starting all the way back in Vajun all the way to the last bridge in Marco Ragnos' tomb. By the Korriban arc, I just began skipping Ragnos Disciples altogether. Saberstaff goons are unparalleled in pure brute strength and lethal danger. Dual-wielding Disciples aren't horrible, but ultimately you have no real reason to stay and fight any of them once you get the general gist of how a fight goes. Unless you're in the Sith catacombs. Never pass on an opportunity to have a lightsaber dogfight. Yeah, take it from a guy who spent 2 hours down there. Sometimes I feel like I call myself good at games just to give myself credibility with absolutely nothing to back it, if anything proof against it. All misstatements work if you're the presently omniscient figure. Anyways, if I don't necessarily enjoy fighting Disciples of Ragnos and New Reborn at all, and actually went out of my way to actively avoid them while I did enjoy Wampas and those before them, why are these hapless skins higher in ranking? Well, they're the meat of Jedi Academy's lightsaber combat, the most cathartically satisfying gameplay experience of any Star Wars game to date. It'd take a special level of dogshit to be a truly bad Force user boss in this game, and while frustrating from unnecessary difficulty, Disciples of Ragnos and New Reborn are lightsaber duels nonetheless. Level hazards. Not uncommon for a Star Wars game, and they debatably qualify as a boss a good 70 to 80% of the time they make an appearance. The Tanab Mutant Rancor's presence is a bit more grandiose than your typical level hazard, however. In truth, he is the level. All of the Cult Investigation side missions are pretty atypical in design, with Tanab Cult Investigation being the poster boy for unorthodox linear progression. The goal of the level, based on description, is to just investigate the, quote, minor cult sightings a la each other, quote, minor investigation mission as well. If you can't tell, minor is a pretty subjective term apparently, insert dick joke. This all gets flipped on its head when a disciple figures it right to unleash the Mutant Rancor for, a reason. It's a plus-sized, radioactive Rancor that follows you from beginning hangar bay to ending conveyor belt, likely massacring you and just about every other thing with a JavaScript along the way. You essentially just run through the factory up to said conveyor belt, wherein you bait the Rancor onto the belt and crush it to death, subtly ending the investigation. Is it revolutionary? No, but it's a damn good time, occasionally, and makes for one of the game's better puzzles, rare as they come. While the Tanab Rancor was killable in the sense of its death cueing the end of its side mission by it being scripted, the Nar Krita Rancor actually being killable in a fight made me let it slide, and I decided on counting it on this list, even with its presence being a bit less constant. The Rancor is indeed killable, as I said, but it takes a bit too long for the rational. I am disturbingly determined, however. I spent close to 30 minutes of my life past 3 in the morning mindlessly throwing my lightsaber at the Rancor until, to my utter surprise, it dramatically keeled over and died. Was it worth the wait? No, not at all. But the Rancor was a great and memorable addition to the Nar Krita side quest, once again serving as a nod to vintage Star Wars while also being great fun to handle. Another level hazard boss. I promise this is the last one. Give me a pass though, it's Boba Fett. Every time he shows up, it's awesome, except like 70% of the time. This isn't the pussy cannon though, this is Legends Boba and he fucking rules. Out of all the previous level hazard bosses, Boba is the most naturally dangerous. He can kill you at any given point without much of a warning, and like the Rancor, is coded to be unkillable up to his noticeably disappointing fight. He lacks any amounts of health and in turn isn't hard whatsoever. He does feature everything he's marketed to have in his arsenal, however, namely a rocket launcher, a flamethrower, a jetpack, a repeating blaster, and a charming personality fit for a good-meaning leader of townsfolk. Boba follows you around the entire temple as you dismantle each Tabana bomb and makes a nuisance of himself in a non-frustrating way as compared to the Tanab Rancor. Although, once again, his fight lasts about as long as... Let's be a bit more creative here, guys. Anyways, having the fight be over in a single slash left a dent on his impression, but still his constant, non-death on impact presence easily makes Boba Fett the best of the 3 level hazard mini-bosses. Surely I wasn't the only one who thought Alora was Darth Talon before playing this game, but anyone with this phenotype is fine by me, no matter who, what, where, I don't give a damn. I'm not alone, there's a tribe. The Hoth mission is plastered with mini-bosses and heavy combat arenas, which is countered by a plentiful supply of shield generators and med packs. In all likelihood, you'll enter this fight with full shield and health, although with Jedi Academy's introduction of force protection, having maximum health isn't exactly life or death anyways. Alora is quite aggressive, making use of force pull, speed, and vertical slashes, meaning sideways movement and rolling is ideal on your part. Since this is just the first encounter with her, however, it's extremely short and should be done with only 3 to 4 clean hits. Having a non-scripted early game bout with a true Dark Jedi was awesome, and serves as a testament to Jaden Korr being a far more enjoyable character to play as than Kyle Katarn. Feel free to comment on that take below. Rax Joris looks like a lot of people. He's also debatably more morally bankrupt than Star Wars' Jim Jones. This is yet another boss from a cult investigations side mission, the level beginning with Rax Joris taking Jaden in as a prisoner and turning him into game. He's a constant threat throughout the level, but the actual boss, or at least what I deem the fight to be, is the closing hangar bay, where he sits on the upper floors while you're stuck on the bottom with a wide spread of varying weapons at your disposal. Disruptor rifles and PLX-2M missile launchers are the most ideal in my opinion, as keeping distance is integral. He has a vicious AoE blaster that makes climbing up the floors one by one challenging and not even particularly worth risking. I decided on doing so for a grand finish and only won by pissing out rockets like a broken Pez dispenser. For a lowly prison officer, Rax Joris is quite a heavy threat, an ugly mug with an even uglier emotional complex, making for one of the more satisfying bosses to beat in the game. Arrogance, defiance, and temptation in a moral universe is the emotional equivalent to mixing pure sodium and chlorine. From the onset, it's clear, if not intentionally made to be clear, that Rosh Pennon was a wide-eyed academy student with eyes maybe a bit too wide, leading ultimately to his abduction via the disciples of Ragnos. Instead of killing him, however, Tavion Axmis took him in as a short-term apprentice to siphon the force energy left behind by Darth Vader in his private fortress, Bast Castle, where Jaden and Kyle visit to dent Tavion's progress. Conveniently, Jaden and Kyle separated in the castle's underworks, so when you reach Rosh and the Kothos twins, Juggernaut-looking new reborn who rely on high-level force abilities instead of lightsabers and have got names for some reason, it's a 3v1. Kyle is nowhere to be found until the party's already over. While investigating further into Rosh Pennon, I found his Vivo, by the way. It's a weird world, man. Rosh's arc and dialogue are pretty cliche. When he turns, he goes on about how Kyle Katarn was holding him back from his true potential, blah blah blah. Like any gank, you ideally want to separate Rosh and the twins and handle them individually. The twins like to keep their distance and go all out on force push when you get too close, so the optimal strategy is either force lightning or pushing/pulling them off their feet, then getting a quick hit in with your lightsaber. Lightning sends the twins flying back should all 3 of them clump together, but they're not incredibly dangerous anyways, more environmental hazards that exist to be a nuisance. nuisance. That said, you'll likely need to rely on force protection at some points, which prevents your force meter from rejuvenating, leaving you open to Rosh's force grip as well as push and pull from the twins. From here on out with the remaining bosses, the fights can be summarized as a balancing act in terms of the quantifiable force meter. Keeping yourself at a constant 50 FP or above is integral to victory, and it's not easy to do so. Like you, Rosh can utilize all the basic force buffs and does so basically always, so try to rely on your lightsaber only. Rosh is constant with lateral movement, however, which makes this a task harder to do than to say to do. Force absorption practically removes the twins as a factor also. I recommend vertically striking Rosh while he's locked in animations for different force buffs. Like Alora, he doesn't have much health and it'll be over faster than you'd think. Rosh Pennon was a fun fight that, beyond being simply engaging, advances Jedi Academy's narrative by reintroducing Tavion Axmis, all while pitting you against the first character you met in the game. If you've yet to catch on, the previous and all remaining bosses are exclusively from the main missions, each climactic, character-driven, and high quality with story implications and fair challenge. This fight made me realize Alora has the same voice actor as Catwoman from the Arkham games. It sounded familiar, but her initial jump scare cutscene was a dead giveaway. Now I really want a body pillow. Throughout the cult facility on Tasper 3, she leads you on a wild goose chase, always multiple steps ahead of you as she slowly lures you into her trap, each time she escapes, leaving Jaden angrier and more determined. At the back end of the fortress, you reach a now redeemed Rosh, whose ultimate purpose is revealed to be for him to become roadkill. Make a song out of that. Before that, however, Jaden's pitted with a choice of light or dark. You can either save Rosh by turning off your lightsaber or kill Rosh in a brutal fashion, turning Jaden to the dark side, but you'll still have to go through Alora with either choice. Whichever decision you choose actually has an impact on the short remainder of the game though. Should you turn to the dark side, not just the Dark Jedi, but the Jedi on Korriban as well will be aggroed, and there's even an exclusive secret boss, save for later. For the sake of time and not to spoil anything, however, the fight with Alora begins. Like all major duels, the arena is exceptionally massive. There's many boxes and objects throughout the room which make for great environmental protection. By this point, you'll likely have unlocked or upgraded all the major force powers, but even so, Alora is able to counter most of your moveset, notably force speed and lightning. Since she uses a double blade stance, she has a few unique animations and attacks on top of your run-of-the-mill Dark Rage and Force Lightning abuse found in any major duel. As such, Force Absorption is an easy counter that rids her of half her moveset, leaving Alora prone to throwing her lightsaber and long-winded combos that keep her defenseless. When not stuck in animation, she tends to jump fairly sporadically. I'd recommend backing off then rolling into a slice that can deal up to a third of her health in one go. Maybe it's some sort of placebo effect, but I find her light side fight to have much more health. I found it significantly harder to get in clean hits with my lightsaber. Nonetheless, with decent timing and preemptive swings when she rolls into you, the fight should be over in quick succession. Alora's death is one of the most impactful moments in Jedi Academy, with her fight beforehand serving as one of the better lightsaber duels in Star Wars gaming. Kyle Katarn is the boss fight equivalent to a nepotism baby. Realistically, it's the name and background that has him this high up, as the difference in overall feel between him and Alora's second encounter is fairly minor, the main difference coming in strategic approach and Kyle's speed, so kinda scratch that. While speed blitzing was unquestionably the strategy to take on any given enemy in Jedi Outcast, be it a low-level goon or the heir apparent to the Emperor of the Galaxy, it's not nearly as practically applicable in Academy, as most Dark Jedi can match your speed buff without as much as a second of an advantage. This remains true for the entire game, up until Jaden faces the Galaxy's main perpetrator of speed blitzing, ironically enough. In the Dark Side ending, you don't fight the puppet Tavion controlled by the spirit of Marka Ragnos. You instead kill her after the first phase, and Kyle steps in to end Jaden. This was one of the game's emotional highlights. Kyle is the fastest enemy you'll face. If you don't match his aggression and speed, the fight will be over in the blink of an eye. Literally. Aside from his unparalleled agility and evasion, he's extremely strong, having a mix of unique attacks that leave you stuck on the ground for multiple seconds, further open to damage and death. In a bit of a throwback to Jedi Outcast, the only reliable route to victory is fast kata, tier 3 force speed, and irrational aggression, which, if played right, turns Kyle from not just the hardest and most frustrating boss to one of the easiest. I'm convinced it's actually impossible to beat Kyle if you aren't egregiously aggressive, as he can force heal well over half his health bar in under 15 seconds. I can't stand bosses that do this, like fucking Melania. And saber locks are about a 90-10 ratio of victory in his favor. He also has absorption and protection active constantly, and I found the only way to get in considerable damage was to move laterally and hit him from either side like a pendulum. To tie into his broken force heal, the only real problem I have is that it feels like Kyle has like 300 FP on top of him being propped up on cocaine. It's a never-ending barrage of force this and force that, and trying to match him is like trying to duck under a tsunami. You'd have better luck winning the lottery than the first person you see outside being like Jeffrey Epstein than no damaging this shit. I died a couple of times to Kyle when his health bar was essentially non-existent, which is always a joy, but the satisfaction that hits you with overcoming a one-way fight as such is one of the best feelings you can get from a video game. Strategic and constant aggression can end this fight in under 30 seconds with a bit of luck, closing off the non-canon ending to Jaden Korr's story in a dazzling way. In a game of new faces, it was weirdly comforting to have a recognizable one as the main antagonist. Tavion Axmis, apprentice of Desan, is easily the best boss in Jedi Academy, from a character motivational point, mechanical uniqueness, and the overall speed, intensity, and difficulty of her last stand. Right from the introductory cutscene onwards, Tavion had a direct hand in each major story beat of Academy's overall exposition. Her presence was felt at all points in the rise in tension as she reached her eventual goal of resurrecting the long-dead Sith Lord Marka Ragnos makes her, in my opinion, a better overarching villain than her master. With Tavion not being physically present for the vast majority of each major mission, instead replaced by a slew of protégés for use, when she does appear, her chaotic presence adds levels to the atmosphere and narrative tension of each individual scene. Nonetheless, the culmination of a near dozen cult investigations, raids on disciple strongholds, and run-ins with questionably powerful apprentices of apprentices of apprentices of apprentices of apprentices is Tavion Axmis's flawless boss fight. When you find her in Marka Ragnos' tomb, she's in the midst of using her scepter she had been siphoning force energy with to resurrect his spirit, and within seconds of confrontation, the fight begins. Tavion is able to use both her lightsaber and the scepter of Ragnos in combat, but the scepter is preferable, as it leaves her firmly anchored in one spot, and with force speed you can both evade the highly volatile beam with relative ease, and wrap around her to get in a short chain of hits. Keeping distance is necessary for this tactic to work, however, so in counter, Tavion will either throw her lightsaber or force pull you into her range at every chance she gets. While I over-exaggerated the first phase in the script to sound professional, it really isn't that difficult, as the hitbox on the scepter's beam is lenient, and due to her intense aggression, she's open to clean swings fairly often. But as is weirdly the case like a lot in Star Wars, a lethal blow isn't nearly enough. A near-lifeless Tavion flips up to the headstone of Marka Ragnos' sarcophagus and resurrects his spirit, leading to the long-dead Sith Lord entering her body and infusing his spirit with mind and Excalibur. This second phase is the true meat of Tavion's boss. The infused sword is extremely powerful, and with it, Marka Ragnos makes use of force drain as well as heavy combos mixed with force lightning and grip. Force absorption works very well as a counter in this phase in turn, but still Ragnos is hyper-aggressive. The only way to survive is to simply match him. Tavion Axmis captures the magical essence this series' combat had carefully crafted and manages to finish the story of Kyle Katarn in an unintentionally beautiful way. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to like and subscribe if you haven't, and otherwise be sure to check in every Wednesday for new uploads. That's all for now. Deuces.